The silence is not empty. It is not a void. After years of waiting, after countless rumors, predictions, and false starts, the quiet from Baghdad is finally a most powerful signal we have ever received. But you have to understand what the silence actually means. It is not the silence of inaction. It is the silence of execution. It is the quiet before the noise of a fundamentally different Iraq. Let me take you inside the interview that defines this moment. On February 10th, Central Bank Governor Ali Al-Awlaq sat down with Ruda and Erbil and delivered what is, without question, the most important monetary policy statement of the year. To the casual observer, it sounded like bad news. Al-Awlaq stated flatly that the central bank is not studying the topic of changing the exchange rate. He called market speculation great confusion and misplaced. He dismissed any link between the budget deficit and currency adjustment as an incorrect link. But you must learn to read what central bankers do not say. Al-Awlaq did not say the rate is fixed forever. He did not say the rate reflects the true value of the currency. He said the central bank is not currently studying a change. That is a statement about the present, not the future. And more importantly, he spent the rest of that interview describing, in extraordinary detail, exactly what the central bank is doing. And what they are doing is executing the most comprehensive monetary reform in Iraq's history. Let me give you the numbers that prove the silence is productive. Al-Awlaq revealed that Iraq's foreign reserves now exceed $100 billion, including more than 76 tons of gold. The money supply stands at approximately 100 trillion dinars. But here is the number that reveals the scale of the challenge. More than 80% of that money supply exists outside the banking system. 80%. Trillions of dinars circulating in the shadow economy, invisible to tax authorities, unavailable for productive lending, and entirely beyond the reach of monetary policy. This is not a sign of a healthy economy. This is a sign of systematic evasion. And Al-Awlaq was remarkably candid about the cause, primarily linked to the phenomenon of tax evasion and non-disclosure of revenue levels, profits and income that are achieved, especially in the trade sector. The silence is the sound of the government finally addressing this problem. Al-Awlaq explained the mechanism with unusual clarity. If money owners feel reassured about the existence of a fair and transparent tax system, they will bring their money and deposit it in banks. Reassurance. That is the product that the central bank and the government are manufacturing. And the manufacturing process is happening silently, methodically, behind the scenes. Consider the customs front. Since January 1st, Iraq has implemented a new advanced customs declaration system for all goods and commodities, the ASYCUDA system, a UN-backed electronic platform. Now requires traders to declare goods before completing financial transfers when goods arrive at the border. Customs officials verify the pre-declared information. This reduces violations and increases tax revenue. On February 11th, the Director General of the Iraqi General Customs Authority, Thamer Qasim, announced that the Kurdistan region has begun responding to the unification of customs tariffs with federal border crossings. He confirmed advanced understandings with the region to implement the ASYCUDA system across all points of entry. This is what the silence has been building toward. For years, one of the largest leaks in Iraq's financial system was the differential between federal and Kurdistan region customs duties. Traders would import goods through the region, pay lower tariffs, and then smuggle those goods into federal Iraq without paying the difference. The dollars that should have flowed into the central bank's reserves instead flowed into private pockets. That leak is now being sealed. Qasim was explicit about who is affected by this change. He stated that those affected are traders operating outside the customs and tax systems, as their financial transfers are not registered in the ASYCUDA system and they lack tax accountability. Entry into ASYCUDA requires both an import license and a tax identification. The silence is the sound of the system being built. On February 8th, Hundreds of traders protested in Baghdad. They shut down markets across the capital. They hung banners reading customs fees are killing citizens. But the government did not back down. Alak stated the government's position clearly, applying the tariff, applying the ASYCUDA system, and applying the advanced customs declaration. The government is proceeding with it. He called the measures beneficial beyond fiscal gains. This is what the silence really means. It means the government is not distracted by protests. It means the reforms are irreversible. It means the old system is dying. Now, let me give you the external dimension of this silence. Since November, Iraqi banks have had to comply with SWIFT international transfer system criteria to access their foreign reserves held at the U.S. Federal Reserve. Muzaffar Saleh, a financial advisor to Prime Minister Soudani, explained that Iraqi banks must now register their dollar transfers on an online platform that reviews every request. The Federal Reserve examines these requests, and if there are any suspicions about the final destination, it stops the transfer. Since this mechanism was adopted, the U.S. Federal Reserve has blocked about 80% of transfer requests due to doubts over where the money was actually going. 80%. That is not the United States weaponizing the dollar against Iraq. That is the United States finally enforcing long-standing anti-money laundering and counterterrorism financing provisions that previous Iraqi governments were too weak, too corrupt, or too complicit to enforce themselves. Economist Ahmed Tabakali put it plainly, contrary to current misconceptions, rumors, and misinformation, there is no evidence of U.S. pressure on Iraq. The new regulations require high levels of disclosure and transparency. This came as a shock for many of our banks, who were not used to this. Soudani's government is not fighting the new regulations, it is embracing them. It is using them as cover to do what previous governments lacked the political capital to do: clean up the banking sector, force compliance with international standards, and starve the parallel economy of the dollars that sustained it. On February 5th, Governor-elect met with U.S. Chargé d'Affaires Joshua Harris in Baghdad. They discussed dollar sales, banking reforms, and ongoing cooperation aimed at strengthening Iraq's financial and monetary stability. Harris affirmed the United States' full readiness to continue supporting the efforts of the Central Bank of Iraq, enabling it to achieve its goals in enhancing financial and monetary stability. The silence is the sound of that cooperation bearing fruit. On February 16th, the central bank issued a directive to all licensed banks and financial institutions emphasizing that applicable laws do not recognize any discrimination between different editions of the U.S. dollar. They stressed the importance of reducing the phenomenon of discrimination in the exchange rate between old and new issues, and the need to adhere to approved standards for foreign banknotes. This matters because it eliminates a common excuse used by parallel market operators to justify lower rates for certain dollar bills. The central bank is systematically closing every loophole. Now, let me give you the political context that frames this entire silence. On February 3rd, Bloomberg reported that the United States had warned Iraqi officials that Iraq's access to oil export revenues could be reduced if Nouri al-Maliki is appointed prime minister. The warning came during a meeting in Turkey between Governor-elect and senior U.S. officials, coinciding with a social media post by then U.S. President Donald Trump emphasizing that Iraqi politicians cannot choose al-Maliki as prime minister. The U.S. frustration grew because of al-Maliki's insistence on not stepping back from his candidacy. Meanwhile, Iran's supreme leader sent the commander of the Quds force to Baghdad with a congratulatory message on al-Maliki's nomination, angering U.S. officials. This is not background noise. This is the geopolitical reality that shapes everything. Iraq's oil export revenues are deposited in an account at the U.S. Federal Reserve in New York, managed by the central bank. The government uses these funds to cover expenses totaling about $7 billion monthly. Oil revenues account for roughly 90% of Iraq's budget. The silence from Baghdad is the sound of a government navigating this pressure, choosing sovereignty over dependence, and building the institutions that will make Iraq truly independent. So, what does the silence really mean after years of waiting? The silence means the central bank's reserves are strong. ALAC confirmed they are at a very comfortable level and would not be threatened even if oil prices fall. The silence means the government is proceeding with customs reforms despite protests. The silence means the Kurdistan region is unifying tariffs with federal Iraq. The silence means the Federal Reserve is cooperating with compliant banks. The silence means the political leadership is making difficult choices. The silence is not the silence of inaction. It is the silence of execution. It is the quiet before the noise of a fundamentally different Iraq. ALAC was asked about the money supply outside banks. He said, if money owners feel reassured about the existence of a fair and transparent tax system, they will bring their money and deposit it in banks. Reassurance. That is what the silence is building. When that reassurance takes hold, when the shadow economy begins to trust the formal economy, the 80% will start flowing into banks. That inflow of deposits will expand the lending capacity of the banking system. That expanded lending will fuel investment and consumption. That investment and consumption will drive economic growth. And that economic growth will be the fundamental foundation for a stronger currency. The silence means the foundation is being laid. The exchange rate will change when the infrastructure is ready. The revaluation will come when the parallel economy is integrated. The dinar will rise when the system that suppresses it has been dismantled. ALAC was honest about this. When asked about changing the exchange rate, he said such a decision would only be considered if Iraq faced an inability to meet demand for foreign currency due to weak reserves. And he explicitly stated that this is not the case at the present time. Not the case at the present time. But the present time is not the future. The present time is the preparation. The present time is the silence. The present time is the quiet before the storm. We have waited years for this, not for an announcement, but for the conditions that make an announcement possible. Those conditions are now in place. The customs system is active. The Kurdistan region is unified. The Federal Reserve is cooperating. The reserves are strong. The political choices are being made. The silence is not empty. It is full of meaning. It is full of progress. It is full of execution. The question is whether you have the patience to listen to what the silence is really saying.